Hi there, my name is Rogoza, and I'm inviting you to join me and Community 10 in a series called Mastering the Guitar. In this series, I'll take you through postures with left and right hand, how to hold the instrument, and certain approaches that I've acquired over the last 20-some years playing on how to make it an enjoyable and fun experience, and at the same time achieving and acquiring your goals. The first thing that we want to look at in playing the guitar is posture, how you hold the instrument, and the access of both arms to the neck and either the sound hole on acoustics or the area just over the pickups on electrics. There's going to be a variety of adjusting. All players have different size hands and arms, and what you want to keep in mind is that you have the access to have freedom of motion with both hands. And I've seen a lot of players over the years, and it's important to note that people put restrictions on themselves by limiting their posture, by having the thumb go too far over the neck, limiting access to the fretboard. So the first thing in developing a solid foundation playing is to keep in mind that you want your hands to have free access to the instrument and that they move as natural as possible. What we'll look at first is the left hand on just how it should generally approach the instrument. There's going to be always exceptions. Sometimes the thumb might come up to play the top area, but overall I found it best to have a general standard pivot point with the thumb being somewhere in the back of the neck, and then having the fingers curve around, having free access to the strings. With this posture, I can touch all 6 strings with minimum movement with the left hand. So it's important to note that with this posture, I can play chords or get into basic scale forms without an excessive amount of motion. And the area of the guitar between the strings and between the frets, the metal things that you see, so you want to have your fingers curve around so that you can easily access them, but at any one time, while a finger's on the string, you still can play the string next to it without having your fingers stopping that or fumbling all over the place. So let's just take a minute now and look at the right hand. The right hand should rest comfortably over the guitar so that you have freedom of motion if you're using a pick for strumming, or if you're into fingerstyle, placing the right hand on the strings, allowing you to pick the strings freely without any excessive crowding or getting in the fingers each other's way. In the end, it's important to look at both approaches to the technique, because when you're playing, then these 2 motions are simultaneous. So it's important to spend time not to rush, but really focus on how your left hand approaches the instrument as well as your right, as 2 different approaches, this way that once the fundamentals are instilled in you, it's much more relaxing to play the instrument. After you've come to the point of dealing with posture and thinking about the approach of your left and right hand, the next step of playing the guitar is, at least for a moment, looking at what's involved with playing the guitar. You've got a series of strings at certain lengths and certain widths, and from there each one has a different sound based on the pitch. So it's important to note then what's exactly happening. With the right hand, you're striking the string. With the left hand, you're placing what they call a stopped at the fret, or position playing where your fingers are in line with certain fret numbers, but you're applying pressure to the string towards the fretboard. So these 2 motions are, when played simultaneously, is what's going on when you're playing on the guitar. A lot of guitar players will play for years and never really look at what's really going on with the fundamentals of playing this instrument. And you'll find yourself improving quite a lot just by focusing on what exactly your fingers are doing. And when you do that, it also helps for active mental imagery that the next time you sit down with the instrument, that you're developing a foundation and that it leads to progression, that your playing is going to get slowly better and better, and that you're not limited by any one particular type of restriction or posture. You want to keep yourself with the freedom of motion is the most important thing, and using the natural movements of the hands to work for you. When you're playing the guitar, it's important to understand that you can press too hard. So there's a point where you want to learn this, it's called the minimum movement principle. There's a point where you press the string and you can try to overemphasize the motion and draw back a little bit, and then you'll find for yourself a comfortable point in between on teaching your body and learning the type of pressure, the amount of pressure that you should place on any one given note. A lot of players that I've seen over the years not only restrict themselves by grabbing the neck and holding it and having their posture in really restricted ways, but that also they're pressing way too hard and they're fighting against themselves, which is unnecessary. And as the guitar that you have right now might have high action. There's a lot of guitars out there that aren't set up properly. But still, if you look at placing the tip of your finger on the string and applying pressure, you really don't need that much effort to stop a string. So it's important that you look at this first. And this approach is what I call tension and release. And explaining that in a little bit more detail, you set yourself up over any fretted area, you apply pressure, there's the striking with the right hand, you sound the string, and then you relax, completing the cycle. And when you hear guitar players playing all those blizzards of notes and whatever it might be that you're listening to, all that they're playing is a combination of tension and release cycles. Each finger is applying to that basic principle. There's an exercise that I call basic exercise number 1. And I'd like to show that to you right now. And it's the most important thing. And how I refer to this exercise, that if it's very difficult to play and if it's too hard for you, then it's going to be very difficult to play anything else, because it's just a basic exercise and it's designed for developing the fingers and the freedom of access to what we call a position. In defining what a position is, the position is any 4 frets correlating to the 4 fingers started in any one area. If, for example, if I'm in the 7th fret and I occupy the next of those 4 frets, I'm in the 7th position. And we'll be using this reference throughout this series and dealing with position playing. There's times when we'll be up at the 12th position, there's times we'll be down in the 1st position. And it's just an easy way to catalog where we're playing and how to get there. So for now, we're going to play the basic exercise number 1, starting in the 3rd position. And so you count 1, 2, 3 frets up and place your first finger. Now, one thing I'd like to tell you right now is it's important that you leave your first finger on the guitar, because right now we're in a learning stage, and it's important to train your body to understand that you need a guide finger. If you take your finger off and expect to find a string, for the most part, for the first couple of years of playing, it's relatively difficult. But if you were to have a guide finger, you'll find yourself, it's a little easier finding the next area of strings or frets. Using that guide finger, it keeps your hand in position. So let's start with this basic exercise number 1. And the most important thing, just as a setup to this, is if we could place the first 4 fingers down on the first string in the 3rd position. And this is, at first, it's going to be a little bit foreign because you've never done this before. But as you acquire familiarity with this, the freedom of movement opens up, and this becomes the foundation to playing. And it opens the doors to actually turning your exercises into art, okay, or the sounds that you're desiring to play. So as you can see what I'm doing here, what I would encourage you to try first is just place your 4 fingers down on, and eventually when you're warming up, on any given string. But for now, I'd like you to try starting just on the first one, the thinnest one, and that's the closest to the bottom. And from there, once the 4 fingers are in place, then what I'd like you to try to do is just lift the first one off and on a few times without any motion with the other fingers. Okay? And in this series, as we get into a little bit more intermediate levels, I'll help you understand more and explain a little bit more involved with what's going on with this motion. But at this stage, just keep in mind that this is an introductory basic exercise, and it's designed just to train the fingers for position playing. So as you try to loosen the first finger, look at your hand to see, am I following natural motion? Do I have excessive motion? And it's very important just to keep it in the area of playing. Then after you've tried the first finger, try the second finger, just taking it on and off. Okay? Eventually, as you develop, it will be required of you to apply a little more pressure and then release. Pressure and then release, coming back to the tension and release cycles. Then try the third finger. And it's important to try to isolate the movement so that when one finger's moving, the other fingers do not move. Then after the third finger, move to the fourth finger. It's very important that you deal with one finger at a time, and you're really training yourself that when one finger's moving, not only is there no need for the other fingers to move, but the other fingers, when they're down, they act as guide fingers, keeping your hand in position and ensuring that you're going to find the notes that you're designing to play in that position as efficient and as quickly as possible. Now, once you've got a little bit of a feel for the first string, the next logical step is, let's try relocating the fingers to the next string. And how I recommend doing this is while the fingers are on the first string, moving up one finger at a time. And just try at this stage, just a couple tension and release cycles, just allowing freedom of motion. You're getting used to this. And if you look at it, this is the motion that you'll be occupying when you're playing the guitar. So it's important that you get used to this, okay? And you'll find yourself acquiring familiarity, and these drills will get easier and easier, and through them they also open up the door to the sounds and actually making music. So now as we've moved up to the second string, the next step is moving up to the third string, one string at a time. It's important to note that going slow and watching what you're doing is very important. Learning the guitar it can be enjoyable, but you have to keep in mind what you play on the guitar. Your fingers don't know what is helpful motion or is harmful motion, and so they'll do whatever they'll do. It's important to understand that you're training them to move in a certain way so that they'll move that way for next time. And that's the most important thing about guitar playing, is we're building on a foundation. And it really is as simple as walking before you run. After we play the third string, then you can move to the fourth string and apply a little tension and release, finger on and off. And eventually this should become a prereq warm-up for all your playing at any time. If you're learning or if you have a gig to play, you should, and it's important. Most players find that they have to warm up. As with any weightlifter or anything dealing with muscles, it's important to warm up the muscles first. So this basic drill, as we start on the first string, you move up one finger at a time, covering all the strings until you get to the top string. And then you can take a break. It's important to note that the thumb at any time in this was in the middle of the neck, and there was no need for it to be moving. Okay? And you'll find yourself improving your playing by eliminating excess movement with the left hand. It's really unnecessary to move all around like this, okay? As you'll find as you practice. And practice sessions shouldn't be lengthy and boring. I encourage 5-minute practice sessions so that when you sit down at the instrument, you pick it up, you try your basic drill, tension and release cycles. I do this warm-up before, after, in the middle, anytime I'm playing. I try to keep up with this drill to keep my fingers warmed up and ready for whatever I might need them for. And it's important to note that you just want to be controlled, and excessive motion is really harmful at this stage. It can, moving your hand here and then moving it this way, you're training your body to do all these really unnatural things when you can get the job done by placing your hand in one position, and that gives you freedom of motion over the whole entire area of the neck. Now, in the training area with the right hand, there's two ways to approach it. As your right hand hovers over the sound hole or the pickups of the guitar, You want to tuck the fingers in. If you're using a pick, place the pick between the first finger and the thumb, and you want to hold it so that the angled part of the pick is what makes contact with the string. And at that point, you just want a slight rocking with the right hand. And you can see how it covers the down and up stroke, which is so important to isolate, because all the playing that you will be doing will be some form of a downstroke and some form of an upstroke. And so it's important that you look at your hand, tuck them in. You'll see players sometimes and they'll have their hands all over the place, and it's really unorganized. And in fact, it works. I found it works against me. I found that keeping the fingers in, if they're not being used, away from getting in the way, has eliminated a lot of unnecessary sounds that I could make and have made over the years, as well as setting myself up that I know where they are when it comes time to use them. And as you begin playing the guitar a little bit more and more, you'll know what I mean. It's important to have minimum movement principles. You don't want any excessive motion that's unnecessary. It really is a waste of energy. With the right hand dealing with finger picking, there's a breakdown of the right hand is that the thumb should have freedom of motion, clearance, that they can clear any of the strings they want, as well if the fingers are placed. Now I've trained my fingers, all 4 of them, to be used, okay? So I place my 4 fingers on the bottom 4 strings and then the thumb on the top 2. And this is basically my right hand positioning, and it allows me to achieve pretty much everything that I set out to, whether it be a complex rag picking type of thing or just straight country alternate bass type of plucking. This right hand position has been optimum for me. And the thing that you want to keep in mind is that when you're looking down on it, there's a slight V that the thumb goes out and the fingers pull in, so that if I were to be strumming a certain chord, I don't have my fingers bunching into each other and restricting their motion. There's a freedom of motion. It's relaxed, and you'll notice that it works in just the way that the hand naturally sits. And so it's important to be as natural as possible, as relaxed as possible, and keep the hands, again, I can't overemphasize what minimum movement means, because you really are training yourself, and once I have a motion down, that's the motion that I'm going to be using there's no need to change. So the sooner that you focus on your posture and getting the hands in order, the sooner you can get on to better things like playing lead solos and two-handed things and all the things that are inspiring us to want to play guitar. When you put these two together, let's go back to the basic exercise and run through it now with some audio, so that what you're hearing correlates with what your hands are trying to do. You set yourself up, your thumb in the left hand's ready to play. You've applied the first finger, it's ready to play. And you want to have just a light tension. You never want to overemphasize the motion when you're playing. In a learning stage, it's good as an exercise to warm up. But when it comes time to play, you begin just to get into touch sensitive. Now, I play on an instrument, on a type of neck that's called a scallop neck. And what that means is the wood on the neck has been routed out so that there is no wood underneath the strings. So that when I'm playing, my left hand touches the strings, but I don't feel any wood behind it. And there's a number of reasons for that. In sessions that follow, we'll get more into types of guitars and types of necks and the benefits of having this approach. One of the immediate things that I can tell you now about it is that there's a point where you can press too hard, and it allows the student or the learner to teach their body that there's a certain point where the exertion is enough and there's no need to press any harder. There's no need to waste any motion. So it's important that you focus on minimum movement principles, and that it just becomes a tension and release cycle. And I can't overemphasize that, because this is the whole key to developing this playing. In combining the right hand, I'm just going to use my thumb of the right hand. I get myself ready, and the same thing with the right. I want to hover over the area that I'm playing, set myself up, so there's minimal movement and minimal waste of energy. I get myself ready, apply tension, strike the string, let it sound, and then release. And that's the whole key to playing the guitar. The only difference between that and Eddie Van Halen is that Eddie Van Halen might play 400 or 500 notes in a short period of time, but his principle is exactly the same. You'll find that you have to stop the signal before another one comes, or sending another signal, because think about it, you've got 4 fingers, and if you're sending signals to all of them at once, it's just a muddled mess. You really are working on one note at a time, and eventually become more proficient at that the fingers just know their way around the neck. And there's just a total freedom of motion, okay? So now looking over that, we've got the first finger and guide. It's as a guide in the position, tension, strike, release. Then we leave the finger on with just a light tension on the string and apply the second finger. We get it ready, our right hand's ready, we apply tension, strike, and release. Now we move the third finger. And you'll notice the other 2 don't need to move. And if you think about it for a second, if they're moving, you're sending signals to them. And the goal of this in the learning stages is to minimize wasted motion and to focus on what motion you really are concentrating. And that's the thing. If I'm moving my third finger, there's no need, or there shouldn't be any need, for any of the other ones to move. Okay? So it seems that the first part of the challenge of playing the instrument, the guitar, and actually most instruments, is minimizing wastage of motion. That when you're playing one finger, the other ones aren't all over the place and the thumb's not all over here. And you'll find that just by watching this video series, basic advice like that, if you intermediate players or people who even play in bands and make a living at music, you'll find that anyone can benefit just by watching your hands and minimizing the waste of motion. There isn't anyone, and I've met quite a few players over the years, that cannot benefit and haven't benefited from certain finger exercises. Okay? Now, there's a way that you can develop this type of dexterity away from the guitar. And so, if we could, what I'd like to do is show you a couple finger exercises that allow you to get this type of dexterity when you don't have an instrument. Perhaps you've got a couple minutes at recess at school, or you're on a coffee break at work. Well, it's a perfect opportunity to do a few finger exercises to keep your dexterity up, but also we want to condition the fingers for certain motions, and there's a whole set of drills that are designed for that. The first basic drills you can see me doing is to hold your hands out straight and your arms, and what you want to do is bend the fingers at the middle phalange, that's the middle knuckle, and you just want to bend them in and straighten them out. And this is another guideline I use for students, introductory level or intermediate level. If you can't do basic exercises like this without an instrument in your hand, it's going to be very difficult or impossible to do something with an instrument, trying to hold the thing and the whole posture and all the things involved with playing, if you can't do a basic finger exercise. So it's important to understand that you want to be able to coordinate your body. This is the whole idea of mastering the guitar, is actually getting the coordination so that when you're on the guitar, it isn't going to be a big struggle and you're not trying to wrestle with the thing, but that it becomes a means of expression. So to begin with this, you want to set yourself up with deliberate motion. It's so important to be deliberate. So you say, I'm going to do 5 sets. So you bend your fingers in 5 times. Okay? Now the thing is, what makes this interesting is that you've got 4 fingers, so now we can get into combinations. Once you get a little better at the movement of this, the thing to understand here is that just like we applied it to the instrument, there shouldn't be a need for any excess motion. Your arms shouldn't be... We're dealing with the fingers, and those are the only members of the arms that should move at that time. Okay? So from here, let's start to develop a little bit more complex. Try just moving the index finger in without moving the other fingers. You just want to bend them, freedom of motion, natural motion, and we're just clearing the path. It's actually neurons traveling along the nervous system, and they're little electrical impulses, and they're telling the fingers to contract and expand. Now try the second finger, and you should be able to move the second finger without excessive motion with the other fingers. Okay? Same going with the third finger. all right, and the fourth. Okay, and this is very important to do as a warm-up. Now you can try that same type of approach and even invent some of your own by placing the fingers together and, say, taking them apart. The focus being independent motion. We want to be able to train the fingers to move on their own without any excessive motion. So for now, I'd like you to focus on that, the basic finger exercise, just 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And it's the same approach that we use when we're dealing with the guitar. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So we'll catch you next time, and from there we'll start developing the foundation and how it applies to actual playing and how it applies then to setting yourself up for all the various styles that there are. These fundamentals are the same whether you want to play jazz, country, rock, blues, heavy metal. Once you condition your hands, then it's really a choice of what you want to play and how you want to express yourself. So have fun practicing, and we'll see you next time in Mastering the Guitar.